Most people think addiction is about pleasure. Here's the surprising truth. Many of the strangest addictions have nothing to do with feeling good at all. They're the brain's desperate attempt to solve stress, emotional pain, or inner imbalance. I'm Dr. Mike, and today we're looking at some of the most unusual addictions you'll ever hear about, not to shock you, but to understand them. Because when you look closer, these behaviors aren't random. They're signals. Signals that the brain is stuck in survival mode, searching for relief wherever it can find it. In this video, I'll break down what modern neuroscience actually says about strange addictions, why people become attached to behaviors that don't even bring joy, how stress, anxiety, and nervous system overload quietly drive these habits, and most importantly, what these cases can teach you about your own routines, urges, and coping patterns. This matters because addiction isn't rare, it just wears different masks. Overworking, doom scrolling, emotional eating, constant distraction, different behaviors, same brain circuitry. If you've ever wondered, why do I keep doing this even when I know better? Stay with me until the end. I'll share a simple question you can ask yourself that helps interrupt compulsive habits before they take over, without guilt or self-judgment. We'll mix real-world examples, clear science, and practical tools you can actually use. No scare tactics, no fake motivation, just understanding how the brain works and how to work with it instead of against it. If you care about smarter habits, mental resilience, and real-world health advice backed by science, you're in the right place. Addiction isn't the brain breaking down. It's the brain adapting to survive. Modern neuroscience shows that addictive behaviors are learned responses formed not because a person lacks willpower, but because the brain once found relief in that behavior during a moment of stress, pain, or emotional overload. Imagine someone living under constant pressure, work stress, relationship strain, or ongoing anxiety. Their nervous system stays activated for long periods, and the brain begins searching for anything that can lower that internal tension. When a certain behavior brings even brief relief, the brain marks it as useful. Neural pathways strengthen around it, not because it feels amazing, but because it creates a sense of safety. Over time, the brain automatically returns to that behavior whenever discomfort appears. This process happens below conscious awareness, in older survival circuits, not in the rational decision-making part of the brain. That's why people often say, I don't even know why I'm doing this. The brain isn't chasing pleasure, it's avoiding threat. Just like your hand instantly pulls away from a hot stove without thinking, the brain repeats habits that once reduced emotional pain. Seen through this lens, relapse isn't a failure of character, it's a memory being triggered. Real change begins when the nervous system learns new ways to feel safe, through better sleep, reduced stress, emotional regulation, and healthier sources of relief. When safety increases, the brain naturally loosens its grip on old survival habits. When stress becomes chronic, the brain doesn't just feel overwhelmed, it reorganizes itself. Prolonged stress shifts control away from the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for planning, judgment, and flexible thinking, and hands it over to deeper survival circuits. These older systems care less about long-term outcomes and more about immediate certainty. Under pressure, the brain narrows its options. It stops exploring and starts repeating. Predictable behaviors feel safer than new ones, even if those behaviors look irrational from the outside. This is why people under constant stress often fall into rigid routines or unusual habits. The brain isn't being creative. It's conserving energy and reducing uncertainty. Over time, this pattern becomes automatic. Each stressful moment strengthens the same neural pathway, making the behavior easier to repeat and harder to interrupt. The decision isn't consciously chosen anymore, it's triggered. This explains why willpower fades during burnout, anxiety, or emotional overload. The brain isn't weak, it's overloaded, and when capacity drops, repetition replaces reasoning. The practical lesson here is powerful. If stress is driving the habit, fighting the habit directly won't work. You have to lower the background noise. Simple actions matter more than dramatic changes. Prioritizing sleep restores prefrontal function. Slow breathing sends safety signals to the nervous system. Short walks reset stress chemistry. Even brief moments of stillness give the brain space to regain flexibility. Mindset matters too. Instead of asking, why can't I stop this? Ask, what pressure am I under right now? That shift moves you from self-criticism to self-regulation. When stress drops, choice returns. Over time, introducing small, predictable, healthy routines like consistent meals or a fixed wind-down ritual can replace harmful repetition with supportive structure. The brain doesn't need perfection, it needs safety, consistency, and room to think again. One of the biggest misunderstandings about addiction is the role of dopamine. Most people think dopamine equals pleasure, but in the brain, dopamine is really about anticipation and relief. It's the signal that says, this might help, do it again. That's why many strange addictions don't even feel good anymore. The enjoyment fades, but the urge remains. The brain isn't chasing happiness, it's chasing the promise that discomfort might ease, even briefly. When stress or anxiety builds, dopamine spikes not after the behavior, but before it. The brain learns to associate certain actions with the expectation of relief. That expectation alone can be powerful enough to drive repetition. Over time, the actual reward matters less than the prediction. This is why people often say, I don't even like this, but I still do it. The brain is responding to a learned signal, not a conscious desire. Understanding this changes how habits should be approached. If dopamine is tied to anticipation, then resisting urges through force alone often backfires. The brain interprets resistance as threat, increasing stress and strengthening the cycle. A more effective strategy is to interrupt anticipation itself. Slow the moment down. Pause for 10 seconds. Take a breath that's longer on the exhale than the inhale. This small delay weakens the dopamine spike and gives the thinking brain time to re-engage. Another practical shift is to replace the promise, not the behavior. The brain needs an alternative source of relief that is predictable and safe. That could be movement, deep breathing, journaling, or even a brief change of environment. The key is consistency. When the brain learns that a new action reliably reduces discomfort, dopamine begins to attach to that instead. Over time, anticipation rewires, the urge loses intensity, and what once felt automatic starts to feel optional again. Another reason strange addictions take hold is control. When life feels unpredictable, the brain searches for something it can manage. External chaos, uncertain finances, unstable relationships, constant demands creates internal tension. The nervous system doesn't just want relief, it wants certainty, and unusual habits often deliver that in a very specific way. They are repeatable, familiar, and completely under the person's control. From the brain's perspective, this matters more than the behavior itself. When everything else feels uncertain, a predictable action becomes an anchor. The outcome is known, the timing is known, the rules are known. That sense of control briefly quiets the stress response. Even if the habit looks odd or harmful, the brain values the stability it provides. This is why attempts to remove the behavior without replacing the control usually fail. You're not just taking away a habit, you're taking away a coping structure. This is where mindset mastery becomes practical. Instead of asking how to eliminate the habit, ask where control is missing in daily life. Small intentional routines can restore that feeling in healthier ways. Consistent wake times, planned meals, a short daily walk at the same hour. These actions send a powerful message to the brain. Some parts of life are predictable again. Actionable change starts small. Choose one area of the day you can structure intentionally. Keep it simple and repeatable. The goal isn't productivity, it's reliability. Over time, this reduces the brain's need to cling to unusual behaviors for stability. Another helpful shift is decision reduction. When overwhelmed, too many choices increase stress. Pre-deciding simple things, what you eat for breakfast, when you move your body, how you wind down, frees mental energy and lowers chaos. As order increases, the grip of strange addictions weakens. Not because you forced control, but because you rebuilt it where it actually belongs, in your daily systems, not your compulsions. To understand many unusual addictions, you have to look beyond thoughts and into the body. An overstimulated nervous system is constantly scanning for ways to settle itself. When stress stays high for too long, the brain becomes sensitive to sensory input. In that state, simple physical sensations, texture, smell, pressure, or repetitive movement can have a powerful calming effect. This isn't accidental. It's the nervous system regulating itself the fastest way it knows how. Think about how a child rocks back and forth when overwhelmed, or how people instinctively rub their hands together when anxious. These actions send signals through sensory nerves that say, you're safe right now. Many strange addictions work the same way. The behavior itself may seem irrational, but the sensory feedback it creates helps quiet the nervous system. Repetition adds to this effect. Predictable movement reduces uncertainty, and reduced uncertainty lowers stress. The practical insight here is that the body often needs regulation before the mind can change. Trying to think your way out of an overstimulated state rarely works. Instead, intentional sensory habits can be used as tools. Slow, rhythmic breathing, holding something textured like a stress ball, walking at a steady pace, even consistent pressure like stretching or a weighted blanket can bring the nervous system down a notch. Habit formation becomes easier when these tools are planned in advance. Don't wait until stress peaks. Build short sensory breaks into your day, 2 minutes of deep breathing between tasks, a brief walk after meals, a calming scent during your evening routine. These small actions teach the brain that regulation is available without relying on harmful behaviors. Over time, the nervous system learns new patterns. The need for extreme or unusual self-soothing decreases. What once felt automatic becomes optional, and calm becomes something you can create on purpose, not chase unconsciously. Many behaviors people call weird make perfect sense when viewed through the lens of anxiety. Anxiety isn't just worry in the mind. It's a full-body state of heightened alert where the nervous system stays prepared for danger even when no immediate threat exists. When that state goes unmanaged, the body looks for release. The result is often repetitive, unusual, or socially misunderstood behaviors that quietly lower internal tension. From the brain's point of view, these actions are practical. Anxiety creates constant background noise, tight muscles, shallow breathing, racing thoughts. A strange habit may momentarily interrupt that noise. It gives the body something concrete to focus on. That focus reduces uncertainty, and uncertainty is what anxiety feeds on. The behavior becomes a shortcut to calm, even if it looks odd to others. This is why simply labeling a habit as bad rarely helps. The real driver isn't the behavior itself, it's the anxious state beneath it. If anxiety remains unaddressed, the brain will always find another outlet. Understanding this shifts the goal from stopping the habit to regulating the system. Actionable change starts with noticing patterns, not judging them. When an urge appears, ask what your body feels like in that moment. Is your breathing shallow? Is your jaw tight? Are your thoughts speeding up? These signals matter more than the behavior. They tell you anxiety is rising. From there, small interventions can interrupt the cycle, slowing the breath, dropping the shoulders, extending the exhale, naming what you're feeling instead of reacting to it. These actions lower anxiety at its source. Over time, building daily habits that reduce baseline anxiety, consistent sleep, movement, limited stimulants, and mental recovery reduces the need for strange coping behaviors. When anxiety is managed, the behaviors fade naturally, not because you fought them, but because the body no longer needs them to feel safe. At their core, all habits, whether ordinary or unusual, follow the same loop: cue, routine, and reward. Strange addictions may seem completely different from drinking, smoking, or checking social media, but the underlying process is identical. The brain identifies a cue, performs a behavior, and experiences a form of relief or reward. The difference is often in what triggers the loop and what the brain perceives as satisfying. For example, a strange addiction might be tapping objects in a specific rhythm, repeatedly washing hands, or compulsively organizing items. The cue isn't boredom or social pressure. It could be a surge of anxiety, a particular sound, or even an internal sensation. The behavior itself becomes automatic, and the reward isn't external pleasure, but a moment of control, reduced tension, or the brief feeling of safety. The brain registers this loop and reinforces it every time it occurs. Understanding this makes interventions more effective. Breaking a habit isn't about willpower alone. It's about identifying the cue and understanding the reward the brain is seeking. Once you know why the loop exists, you can substitute a different routine that satisfies the same need without negative consequences. If the reward is stress relief, deep breathing, walking, or squeezing a stress ball can provide a similar effect. If it's predictability, creating small, repeatable routines in daily life can fulfill that need. The key is awareness. Start noticing your own triggers and the subtle rewards that follow. Journaling or simply pausing for a few seconds before acting can give the thinking brain time to intervene. Over time, these small shifts weaken the automatic loop, making unusual behaviors optional rather than inevitable. When the brain learns that its needs, safety, control, stress relief, can be met in healthier ways, the grip of strange habits begins to loosen naturally. Understimulation is an often overlooked driver of strange habits. The brain thrives on a balance between challenge and calm. When stimulation is too low, when life feels monotonous, predictable, or empty, the nervous system craves input. Without it, the brain can hijack attention, seeking novelty or intensity in whatever way is available, even if the behavior seems unusual or socially frowned upon. This is why some people develop compulsions during long periods of boredom or low engagement. Their brains are not lazy or weak. They're searching for stimulation to maintain arousal and alertness. From a neurological perspective, dopamine plays a key role here too. Novelty triggers dopamine release, signaling the brain that something matters. When everyday life is understimulating, any unusual or repetitive action that creates sensory or emotional feedback can feel more rewarding than it objectively is. The brain essentially says, I need input, this works. Over time, this feedback loop can cement behaviors into habits that feel automatic and difficult to interrupt. The practical takeaway is that understimulation can be managed proactively. Building small sources of controlled novelty into daily life can reduce the brain's urge to seek extreme or unconventional behaviors. Simple strategies include varying your routine, learning a new skill in short bursts, or intentionally engaging the senses, listening to music, exploring new flavors, or walking in a different environment. Even micro challenges like changing your route to work or taking 5 minutes to stretch differently can satisfy the brain's craving for stimulation. Another key strategy is mindful engagement. Rather than passively scrolling or zoning out, focus on activities that fully occupy attention and body. When the brain is sufficiently engaged, the compulsion to seek intensity in unconventional ways diminishes. Over time, structured novelty and conscious stimulation retrain the nervous system, replacing erratic impulses with purposeful, fulfilling experiences. It might seem counterintuitive, but high self-control can sometimes increase the risk of unusual addictions. People who are highly disciplined often excel at resisting common temptations, junk food, late-night scrolling, or impulsive purchases, but that same skill can backfire in unexpected ways. When life is stressful or emotions run high, the brain still seeks relief, novelty, or control. Highly self-controlled individuals may unconsciously channel these urges into behaviors that are socially acceptable or hidden rather than obvious or socially discouraged. Over time, these behaviors can become rigid, repetitive, and even compulsive. From a neurological perspective, the brain of someone with high self-control is skilled at delaying gratification, but it still needs dopamine and stress relief. When usual outlets are blocked, the nervous system will find alternatives, sometimes unusual ones. For example, someone may obsessively organize objects, develop unusual tactile habits, or engage in repetitive micro-routines that give them a sense of order. These behaviors serve the same purpose as any other habit. They reduce stress, create predictability, and give the brain a small surge of reward. The practical lesson is that self-control alone is not enough. Awareness and intentional regulation are equally important. Highly disciplined individuals benefit from proactively creating healthy outlets for stress, novelty, and sensory satisfaction. Structured routines that allow for safe, controlled indulgence, like short breaks for movement, creative projects, or mindfulness exercises, can prevent unusual behaviors from taking over. Another key insight is to balance rigidity with flexibility. Schedule micro-spontaneity into your day, a different walking route, a new hobby, or even a brief moment of play. These small, intentional variations satisfy the brain's need for novelty without triggering compulsive patterns. By combining self-control with self-awareness and strategic outlets, the risk of hidden or unusual addictions decreases, turning discipline into a tool for resilience rather than rigidity. The brain loves predictability. Even harmful habits are attractive because they are familiar and reliable. When life feels uncertain, the nervous system craves patterns it can anticipate. Predictable behaviors reduce mental effort and provide a sense of safety, even if the outcome isn't beneficial. This is why people often return to the same unhealthy routines. They are comfortable, automatic, and require little conscious decision-making. The mind values certainty over novelty, and sometimes certainty feels safer than change, no matter how harmful the behavior may be. From a neurological perspective, repeated behaviors strengthen neural pathways, making the habit almost reflexive. The cue triggers the behavior, and the expected outcome, relief, distraction, or control, reinforces the loop. Over time, the brain prioritizes predictability over rational evaluation. That's why someone might continue scrolling social media for hours, bite their nails, or engage in unusual compulsions. The habit isn't necessarily enjoyable, it's dependable. The brain interprets predictability as low risk and familiar, which lowers stress temporarily. The practical takeaway is that breaking harmful habits requires offering the brain a new form of predictability. Instead of just trying to stop a behavior, replace it with a routine that is equally consistent but healthier. For example, if stress triggers repetitive snacking, introduce a consistent mini walk, breathing exercise, or journaling habit at the same time each day. These alternatives satisfy the brain's craving for predictability while providing real benefit. Another strategy is to make environmental cues predictable in a positive way. Preparing meals in advance, scheduling short breaks, or creating a set wind-down routine signals to the nervous system that order exists. Over time, the brain learns that safety and consistency no longer rely on old, harmful behaviors. By consciously designing predictability, you shift the mind's automatic responses from destructive patterns towards supportive, intentional habits. Strange addictions might seem baffling at first, but now you can see them as messages rather than failures, signals that your brain is asking for relief, balance, or control. The real power comes from pausing, observing, and understanding these behaviors instead of judging them. This week, take a moment to notice one automatic habit in your own life. Ask yourself what need it's fulfilling and explore healthier ways to meet that need. Small, intentional steps, breathing, movement, structure, or mindful pauses can replace old patterns without forcing them away, giving your nervous system the safety and predictability it craves. Remember, true health isn't about rigid control or perfection. It's about awareness, self-regulation, and building smarter, sustainable habits that support your mind and body. Every insight you apply brings you closer to calm, clarity, and resilience. If you found this video helpful, make sure to like it and subscribe to Dr. Mike for more practical, science-backed guidance on health, habits, and living well.